Welcome into episode 12 of Cleveland Sports Realm. I am Kevin Shagru, joined alongside my co-host, Jerome Patakauskas. Jerome, how are we doing? We're recording this Wednesday night. How are we doing this Wednesday?
Oh, well, besides the Buckeyes winning the national title, it has not been a wonderful week for me, but that's okay. That's not here nor there. I've had a couple issues, bumps in the road, some major ones, but that's okay.
We'll have those weeks.
The Buckeyes won the title, so that makes me feel a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. That's something at least you can look on, in 10, 15 years. You're not going to look back and think about the last couple days that have been rough on you. You're going to think about the title game that you watched and your team watching it. And I'm going to end up thinking about my team losing it. I'm still repping my navy gold, my navy blue, my gold, my green. I'm still repping the Notre Dame attire today. I'm proud of the team. I'm proud of the year that they had. And unfortunately, they came out too slow, they came out too fast originally, and then they slowed down too much in that first half, and it was too much to overcome. But it ended up being a great national championship game. It didn't look like it was going to be, even just over one half in. With Ohio State's drive at the beginning of the second half. But it ended up being a good game. Unfortunately, the Irish come up just a little bit short. But for the state of Ohio and most of our listeners, I'm sure you all are very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really, really happy for Ryan Day. A lot of people, including me, really have given him a lot of crap for what he's done, the last handful of years. And, and not being good enough with beating Michigan. But to me, you win a national title, that triumphs everything. And that's what Ohio State did. They won the first 12-team playoff, which is really cool because you go back to 2014. They won the first 4-team playoff. So really cool. They didn't have an easy path. They knocked off Oregon, knocked off Texas, knocked off Notre Dame, and then go all the way back to the first round, knocked off Tennessee. And quite frankly, the Texas game was probably the most challenging start to finish for them, but they did a lot of it in dominating fashion, and I give Ryan Day and his entire coaching staff credit, and these Buckeye players. How many of them came back and, could have went to the NFL last year, chose not to, wanted to come back to beat Michigan. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. But I think those guys will not remember that, but they'll remember that they were 2024 national champions.
Yeah, they absolutely will. And something I've been thinking about over the last few days, going back to an episode we recorded, I want to say it's about 5 or 6 weeks ago, you and I had debated, the value of Ryan Day as a head coach. And I just want to say, I know I sound like a bitter Notre Dame fan when I say this, but I genuinely think Ohio State fans, the average fan themselves, I'm not including yourself in this because I think you're a very, very intelligent sports mind. I think there's a lot of...
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intelligent sports minds out there, including, some Ohio State fans. I think the majority, though, are some of the most delusional fans that I've ever come across when it comes to either major sports or college sports. I think you guys just looked at, this whole Ryan Day thing and just... being to a national championship, having double-digit wins every chance that he's had, has come up short in a couple games, but, had maybe the toughest road. I mean, obviously the toughest road we've ever seen when it comes to the 12-team playoff. It's the only 12-team playoff that we've had. But they had an absolute gauntlet to go through, and they got through it. Ryan Day led that team through it, and Will Howard obviously played phenomenal, the best football probably of his career over those last 4 games. Ohio State came to play, and they were my pick going into the 12-team playoff to come out, and that's what happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know what? Once they beat Tennessee the way they did, I thought to myself, boy, the only way they're going to lose now is if they beat themselves, and that fortunately never came to fruition. But when you break down the inside of this game, like you pointed out, Notre Dame off to a great start, right? They take the early 7-0 lead. But I thought to myself, and I know we had talked about this earlier this week, Riley Leonard looked absolutely exhausted. It's almost like the drive was great for them, but it killed their quarterback because it took them like all the wind out of his sails.
Yeah, obviously, after that first drive, it was a 16-play drive, just about 75 yards. They drive down. I think Riley Leonard had at least 5 carries. Obviously, he ends it with scoring, but it seemed like Ohio State they didn't, not that they didn't play the quarterback run well, but obviously just didn't play it well enough. And, they go down the next drive and score. And it seemed like Notre Dame, not that you're necessarily forfeiting drives, but it seemed like they were taking it pretty conservative on that second offensive drive that they had. They go 3 and out, and I think a lot of it had to do with the health of Riley Leonard, and because he immediately went to the sideline, I guess, after he scored that touchdown, and he threw up and needed a breather. And I think they were just playing it conservative that second drive and making sure that he didn't get too winded, even though he already was. And they basically end up forfeiting that drive. Ohio State gets the ball back. It's 14-7, and then the Buckeyes were off and rolling from there.
Well, yeah, and then one thing that I want to point out is Chip Kelly started treating Will Howard like Riley Leonard a little bit in the second half, and it was like quarterback run, quarterback run, quarterback run. And I started to get frustrated with it as a fan. Seeing it, I started to get frustrated with it. But I think, and I had my good friend Sean point this out to me today. We had talked about the game, that was today. And he had said, I think they were just trying to take time off the clock. He goes, and Will Howard was getting good chunks on those runs. So maybe that was Chip Kelly's plan all along, was to just eat that clock away. But I can't lie to you, as a Buckeye fan, if that was their master plan, they did a hell of a job, because I certainly got very, very nervous watching that, as you see Notre Dame creep closer and closer, and, Ohio State's just getting so conservative. But I'll give them credit. Whenever push came to shove and they needed a big play, they knew who to go to, and Jeremiah Smith came through after Notre Dame made it a little too close for the Buckeye, even the coaching staff's liking.
Yeah, Notre Dame ended up making that obviously a one-score game, and ended up being an 8-point game with about 4 minutes left. So, obviously to your point, they definitely inched and they crawled back to get back into that game. It was a valiant effort, just come up a little bit short. And yet Jeremiah Smith, he was very much contained for most of the game. The biggest play he had up until the big play, that big 60, 70-yarder that he had basically to seal it up, was just that 10-yard
touchdown.
That 10-yard motion touchdown. The rest of it was actually Notre Dame's true freshman corner, Leonard Moore, number 15. He played Jeremiah Smith very well. True freshman, 3-star prospect, had to play a lot due to the Ben Morrison injury this year. And he very much held his own. I would even say a lot of the time locked up Jeremiah Smith. It was Christian Gray, our more veteran corner on the other side, that had a lot of trouble. Didn't contain him, although I will say he was definitely pointing out that Jeremiah Smith was going to get the ball on that touchdown. It didn't seem like the rest of the defense got that message there. So obviously a very much a lapse in coverage for the Irish, and ends up obviously coming to the Buckeyes' benefit. But it seemed like when it was Christian Gray that was lined up on Jeremiah Smith, Will Howard knew exactly who to go to.
Right, and I know you had pointed out earlier this week the veterans struggled against the youngster in Jeremiah, but the Notre Dame youngster Leonard Moore, he did a nice job against him. But he's such a challenge to cover, as we've been talking about for weeks and weeks on this podcast. And another Buckeye who I want to talk about real quick, though, Quinshon Judkins was outstanding. 3 touchdowns. I mean, you could have argued. Now, looking at Will Howard's numbers, they were really good. Actually, they're in front of me here. 17 of 21, 231, 2 touchdowns for a QBR of 99.1. But Quinshon with 11 carries for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then 2 catches, 21 yards. I know Will, and oftentimes we do see the quarterbacks get them. But I think you could argue that Quinshon could have won the national championship game MVP too.
I thought he probably should have. And we talked last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, because I think it was after the Oregon game. Or no, it was after the Texas game, I believe, that it was, in my opinion, the biggest impact it felt that Quinshon Judkins had on a game since being a Buckeye. And it's hands down the national championship game.
Yeah.
He had a hat trick, busted off a big run, caught a touchdown, and even on his one touchdown, the rushing touchdown, had a huge stiff arm and barreled his way into the end zone. He ran tough, and he wanted it a lot. I thought he deserved it as well over Will Howard.
Yeah. Now Will did play really well too,
Yeah.
and I thought what the game came down to, and you can look at a lot of different elements, and obviously we are looking through all kind of different lenses here. But it seemed like after, when Notre Dame, we knew going in, and we had talked about it extensively on this podcast, Notre Dame wanted to run the football.
Yep.
They had a great running back in Jeremiah Love. Obviously, Riley Leonard, we know, has been a threat all year, more so with his legs than his arm. And what I think the game came down to is we knew Notre Dame wanted to run the football. And after that first drive, Kevin, they just really couldn't do it effectively. 26 total carries for 53 yards. Jeremiah Love, who we had talked about for weeks and weeks on this podcast, and rightly so, he was essentially a non-factor in the title game. And credit to the Ohio State defense on that. But Notre Dame, in the second half, they obviously made it close. Buckeyes got a little bit conservative. But credit to the Irish Jew, because I think a lot of teams probably would have quit. They didn't. But I ultimately, one big thing you could come down and say about this game is Notre Dame's strength is running the football on offense. Ohio State took that away. They were forced to pass. They did in the second half, but it took them probably too long to become a consistent threat through the air.
Yeah, but I will say that, that's kind of a knock on Marcus Freeman's coaching in the national championship, if you want my opinion. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, we've talked about, easily I would say a top 5 running back duo in the nation. We've argued probably around top 3. To give them a combined 7 carries the entire game, I think is absolutely sickening. Even though Ohio State's playing the run well, you still can't, I don't think you can just negate going to the run anymore. I don't think you can just stop doing it just because it hasn't worked the first few times.
But I could argue back with you on that. And what about the score? Probably had a big impact on that, because at one point it's 31-7, so you're trying to get back into it. How realistic is running the football, though?
Well, Riley Leonard had 17 rushing attempts. They weren't all on that first drive.
That's true.
So if we're just going to do, at one point it seemed like, my gosh, we're just on that one drive towards the end of the game after the fumble, it seemed like every play that drive was a Riley Leonard quarterback draw or just a lob to try to draw a pass interference penalty. Can we run a play and get some just chunk plays and just try to march down the field instead of going for it all, or just getting these 5-yard little quarterback scampers? I wasn't too thrilled with the offensive game plan.
Yeah, I guess you could argue. Yeah, obviously looking at it from your point of view through a fighting Irish lens, if you will. Yeah, I could see that. For me, like I said, I got a little bit aggravated with our game plan, but as my friend pointed out to me today, I think that a big piece of that was trying to eat up that clock, and
I'm sure it was.
And so I thought it was a little too conservative, but then, like I said, when push came to shove, they went back through the air and hit the best receiver in the country and did what they had to do. Now, another thing about this game, I'll tell you from an Ohio State point, and I'm just curious, just based on simple game feel. For me, as an Ohio State fan, the first Jaden Greathouse touchdown was like, okay, whatever. I didn't care, quite honestly. Then the second one, when Leonard hits that perfect lob, it's like, perfect deep ball to Jaden Greathouse. That's when, as an Ohio State fan, I'm like, okay, we might have a game on our hands. So that's how I felt.
That second Jaden Greathouse touchdown brought it to within the one score, and then
right.
It was a potential one score, and then we had the reverse pass that ultimately brought it to one score. But yeah,
right. So that's how I felt. The second one I got legitimately nervous on. As a Notre Dame fan, when did you start thinking, oh my, we actually might have a chance? Not. Realistically, was it after the first touchdown or the second one?
I would say the minute that I noticed that we had a chance was the forced fumble on Emeka Ibuka.
Okay.
Was because, if you remember, I'd been preaching all week, Notre Dame had to get a big turnover, maybe 2,
right,
in order to actually stay in this game. And they got it, and they went down the field, and they ended up having Marcus Freeman settled for a field goal, and he missed the field goal. And that's when I was like, this was all for nothing. That big play was all for nothing.
Yeah, no,
But that was the play that I was like, okay, we actually have a chance in this game, is when that forced fumble happened.
And I think Marcus Freeman's a heck of a coach. We've talked about him a lot. You go back and listen to old podcasts back in the regular season of college football, and even in the playoff, we talked about how great of a coach this guy is. But I thought kicking there was useless. Like, and I heard his argument after the game, but I still find no use in it. Like, dude, at that point, it doesn't really do you any good to kick a field goal. And I know hindsight's 2020, and the Mitch Jeter, the kicker for Notre Dame, had been perfect in the playoff. But Kevin, I still thought it was stupid.
So in the moment, I wanted them to go for it. Now looking back at it, I still wanted them to go for it. But Marcus Freeman's logic behind it, in my opinion, does justify the decision. I'm not mad at him for that decision. His logic was, you get 3 points here, you need 13 points after, and not 16. If they don't get the first down there, it's the same result as if Jeter missed the field goal and you're down 16. It's still a 2-score game regardless. So I think he was just making it easier for himself there. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough position to be in. It definitely is in that magnitude. But yeah, I don't hate the decision looking back at it. I mean, I wish they would have went for it, but I understand the logic behind it. And listen, if Jeter hits that field goal, Notre Dame's defense gets a stop, that Drayton Greathouse touchdown all of a sudden brings it to within 5 or within 6 as opposed to 8, then we're like, oh my God, Ohio State settles for a field goal potentially at the end. It's still an 8-point game. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. So I thought he did a good job justifying it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I still don't agree with it. I mean, yeah, I was saying as I see the point that you were making, but I can't agree with it.
I would have went for it too, but I'm just, I understand it, and I'm not gonna hold it against them.
Right. So with all that being said, obviously 34-23 is the final. Kevin, did you catch the bugaboo at the end of this game? There were a lot of certain segment of people who were basically holding their breaths in anticipation on Jaden Fielding's field goal at the end. If you knew, the spread was 8.5.
8.5.
And that was just funny to me. Right at the end, a lot of folks were very, very, very nervous about that. And it was funny seeing some of the reactions to that online. But, congratulations to your team on being runner-up, and quite honestly having one of the best years I've ever seen the Fighting Irish have in my lifetime. Now that goes back circa 97, same as yours,
right.
But they had a hell of a season. And then congratulations to, of course, the first 12-team playoff champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes, getting the third one of my lifetime, and it feels good. Maybe someday.
I'm also going to say, yeah, I'm hoping someday it happens. I really am. But I also want to say congratulations to Emeka Egbuka, honestly, for becoming the leading pass catcher in Ohio State history. It's impressive to have done that, especially never being the best receiver on Ohio State. He's just been Mr. Reliable, number 2 option, his entire career there, it seems like. And he's had a great college career. Yeah, absolutely. And I think he'll end up being a first-round pick. I do too. He just seems, and I'm going to call it right now, he seems like a Pittsburgh Steeler. For something just tells me that he's going to end up being a Pittsburgh Steeler.
No, I could see that too.
Now, I did want to ask you really quick, Jerome, about this championship. It is kind of weird because Ohio State deserves a ton of praise. They went through an absolute gauntlet, but they were also a 2-loss team that made the playoff that wasn't a conference champ.
Right.
So I've heard a lot of debate, honestly. I've seen some things on X or Twitter about whether this is the most impressive championship ever because of the gauntlet they had to go through, or the least impressive considering that they weren't a conference champ and they were a 2-loss team. Do you think it's on either of those spectrums, or do you think it just kind of lies somewhere in the middle?
I'm going to say time will tell on that one, because this is the first 12-team playoff and we don't really know. But I will say, I think what we learned is conference championships are not all that important. And, luckily for Ryan Day, it looks like the rivalry games aren't that much important either anymore.
They're gonna become more important though. The conference championship games. I think they're gonna end up doing the whole, and we've talked about it a couple times on this podcast before. But I think they're gonna end up, whether it's next year, I'm not sure how long the contract on this lasts, but at some point they're gonna end up reseeding these teams. I think, to avoid the gauntlet that Oregon would eventually have had to go through as a 1 seed.
Right. I think that could happen too. But if it stays how it is right now, I think, it kind of does devalue the conference championship in the rivalry game. Unless
it totally does.
Unless, of course, you're a Clemson, which the only way you were going to get in is by winning that automatic qualifier. But, like, for Ohio State, they went home. They packed their bags up, Well, actually, they never left because they lost. They lost to Michigan and Columbus. They stayed there. They had a good period of rest until the Volunteers came into town. And, but to your point, the national title game ended up being the 7 versus the 8 seed. So that reseeding thing is something that could be looked at a little more, intensely down the road.
Which I do think we probably ended up with, would you say 2 out of the best 3 or maybe 2 out of the best 4 teams in college football?
So
I would say Oregon and Texas are probably up there with Notre Dame and Ohio State, and I think those are the top 4. I'm not sure how you would rank those.
I'm going to say
obviously Ohio State won.
I'm going to go ahead and say I thought this ended up being 2 of the best 4 because I think that Oregon was probably a little bit better than Notre Dame, and I think that Texas was probably a little bit better than Notre Dame. And obviously, Notre Dame, credit to them. They got there. They beat Georgia, which you haven't seen anybody beat Georgia a lot the last few years. They beat Penn State, it could be argued too.
In epic fashion, too.
Right. Penn State, just always seems to do whatever they can to lose a big game. But Irish got it done, and, they got there. So I'm not going to devalue their path on the way there. I think Ohio State's was harder. I think that's an objective point of view, not subjective.
I agree. It was a harder path.
Yeah, but I'm not devaluing anybody who gets through this thing because I saw the way it worked this year. And
you're going to have to beat 2 prominent programs in order to get to the national championship regardless.
Yes. And Notre Dame did by beating the Bulldogs and the Nittany Lions, and Ohio State did by beating. I'm not going to put Indiana there. Sorry, I can't call them a prominent program.
No,
it's
of course
the first time that the Hoosiers were good in football since I don't even know.
I agree with that. I was referring to Penn State and Georgia as the prominent programs.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Because you're going to end up getting like an SMU wouldn't be prominent. Like you'll have some of those teams that are going to squeak in there.
Right. So that's that. Real quick, before we wrap up talking college football, because it'll be a while before we discuss it on the podcast again.
Yeah.
Coming back into next year, Ohio State, I think, is actually going to be pretty loaded again because you'll have Julian Saban as a quarterback. You'll have Peoples as one of the running backs to replace because both those running backs will go to the NFL. And then C.J. Donaldson's coming in from West Virginia. Your receivers, you'll be fine. I hope Sonny Styles stays on defense. And I know for you talking about it, Notre Dame, they should be bringing back a bunch of their key pieces too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're keeping most of the receiving core. I know Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, 2 of our 3 best receivers will be coming back. We're going to lose Mitchell Evans, our top tight end, which we were talking about the other day. I think he's crept into, round 4 to 5 territory, if I were to guess, in this upcoming draft. That may be a little bit biased, me being a Notre Dame fan. Riley Leonard obviously gone, but I think, while that running ability hurts, the thing that killed us the entire year and in the championship game was the ability to throw the ball down the field until that Jaden Greathouse touchdown.
Right.
And then defensive side, losing a couple big defensive tackles, Riley Mills and Howard Cross, Xavier Watts, one of the best safeties in the nation, is going to be gone. And then the jury's still out on Ben Morrison, top corner in the country, whether he's going to come back or not. Nobody really knows how that injury is going to influence his draft stock. And then, of course, Jack Kaiser, he's been a leader on this defense for 5-6 years now. So there are some key pieces that are leaving, but Notre Dame's still a very young team. I still imagine them being a top 10 team at the end of next year, depending on how the quarterback play is. So hopefully we'll get to see another run out of them next year.
Yeah, I think the same for Ohio State, and that's the final point. I wouldn't be surprised. Let me put it this way. I'd be more surprised if both those teams did not return to the playoff format as it sits with 12 teams next year. So I
agree.
So again, that was fun. Shake your hand. Easy
it was a good game. It was a good game.
It was a good game, but yeah, that's that. So let's move on to pro football here, Kevin. The divisional series or the divisional
recap.
Yeah, divisional recap. We'll start in order of the way the games went. Chiefs beat the Texans. I know a lot of people, including myself, were very upset with the officiating in this game. The Chiefs are the new Patriots in the fact that it always does seem the officials are on their side. Nonetheless, they get it done. They beat Houston, but there were a couple questionable calls in this game. I'm sorry, I have to say.
Yeah, there absolutely were, and something I would like the NFL to investigate at some point is I don't know why I just lost my train of thought.
NFL investigating?
Yeah, the NFL investigating. Oh, the amount of penalties, the automatic first downs that are thrown when it's third down. I feel like it's never first or second down. It's third down and to bail a team out occasionally. So those drive me nuts. But yeah, there was a huge roughing the passer on third down, coincidentally, against Patrick Mahomes that kept the drive alive. It would have been cool to see Houston upset them. And honestly, I never like to blame the game for officiating or blame the officiating for the outcome of the game. But it definitely had an influence on it. You know, the Texans, I read, were the first team ever to not turn the ball over and outgain their opponent by 100 or more yards, and they still lost by over a touchdown. So, yeah, I would say the officiating definitely had an influence. But overall, I do think the Chiefs are the better team at the end of the day.
Right, so do I. I just thought that there were some very questionable calls, and we're not the only two sitting here saying that. There's been a lot of folks who have said that this week. Let's move on to the stunner. Washington goes in and beats Detroit. The great Jane Daniels, I called him on the podcast last week. I didn't think he had enough. I didn't think Washington had enough juice to go in there and pull this upset off. Detroit was my Super Bowl team,
I know.
And I was wrong on that one. But Detroit was my Super Bowl team. Kevin, you said you wouldn't be surprised if Washington made it a close game. You did go ahead and pick the Lions, but I don't think anybody saw them going in there and winning by double digits. And quite honestly, the thing the game came to was Jared Goff just turning the ball over willy-nilly, and then, Ben Johnson getting a little too cute and a little too fancy.
Yeah, he threw a wide receiver pass when they were down like 2 touchdowns already or something. It's like, dude, what are we doing here, man?
Yeah, having Jamison Williams throw the ball with your season on the line is probably not your brightest idea.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, credit to Washington Commanders. And then I think on the other side, the Lions defense, just too many injuries. I mean, they lost to Meek Robinson right as soon as the game started. And I'm not saying that was a difference maker, but I mean, with Aiden Hutchinson out, and there was a multitude of guys they had on injury reserve on that defense, I think it just all added up. And then their offense turning over the ball like crazy. I mean, this was a shocker to a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I did say last week, I did pick the Lions, but I did say if I were to pick an upset this week, it probably would be the Commanders going into Detroit. And it's
right.
Nothing to back it up with, just kind of a gut feeling there. But, Jaden Daniels, what a player. I cannot get over how, and I think the most impressive thing about him right now, it isn't even the throws that he makes. It's when he drops back, it does not look like he is. It looks like he is just smooth, calm, transitioning through his reads, and then he throws whatever's open. He has been unbelievable to watch, and that's clearly carrying in the locker room for Washington, and they're coming out to play for him and for the rest of their teammates. It's cool to see that culture change right now in Washington.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad about this because obviously he's seen a few more years of football than me, and I had talked to him about this early Sunday morning. We had talked, and I said, do you ever remember a rookie being this, composed and this unbelievable, this early in his career? And my dad said the 2 guys that came to mind were Ben Roethlisberger in 2004 and then Dan Marino way back when. And,
wow.
So that's pretty high company for this kid to be in, but it shows you, man, the power of a franchise quarterback. I mean, this kid's
changes everything.
And he's got them in the NFC title game. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So they will face the Philadelphia Eagles as they took care of the Rams at home, 28-22. I picked the Rams in this one. I was wrong there again. I was only 2 for 4 in my divisional round picks, but I picked the Rams. They gave them a good game. Ultimately, and I hate to take the easy route out here, the Rams really did struggle with the elements, though, man. That just wasn't their game. They were fumbling the ball around. I mean, they really struggled playing in that snow.
Yeah, this was one of the first games that I've noticed, because we always talk about how, as being Browns fans, that when games are played in Cleveland, that we should have like an edge when it comes to the weather, if it's snowing or whatever. And I tend to I do think that's a lot of malarkey. Like, I think a lot of it just comes down to who's the better team at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter the elements. I mean, we've seen New Orleans come into Cleveland in below zero temperature and win.
Right.
So this was one of the first games I can remember in a while that it seemed like a team that wasn't used to those elements. It really did get to them, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately it looked like they didn't have a chance, and then they come in and they get that safety, I believe, and then the deep ball and Puka Nacua with a amazing catch in the snow, and then ultimately they did fail on 4th down there with about a minute left. So that sets up your NFC Championship, the 6th seed Commanders against the 2 seed Eagles. We'll get there in a second. Let's talk about the game that we had talked about extensively on this podcast this week. We called it being a great game. It delivered. The Bills against the Ravens. And Kevin, we both believed whoever won this game was going to be Super Bowl bound. I think you had said the Ravens, I had said the Bills, but we both said it last week. It could have won either way.
Yeah.
Poor Mark Andrews. I will start by saying that. Poor Mark Andrews.
Yeah, he had a rough one, huh?
And also, Bills fans, give yourselves a round of applause and a pat on the back. I saw that they are donating copious amounts of money to Mark Andrews' charity, which is really cool. That's really a nice,
as a thank you for getting them to the AFC Championship game.
Well, that, and I think also just because they feel bad for the guy, but they're not going to apologize. They'll be moving on to take the Chiefs, but I think that is a really cool gesture by Bills Mafia.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's kind of my feedback on it. It's all right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would like if we were facing, the Bengals and Jamar Chase dropped the first down and we went to the AFC Championship game. I don't know if I'd donate to Jamar Chase's charity, but
hey,
here Bills fans are.
They're doing it. That's their thing. Talk about this game, though. I think what ultimately, it was a great fought game. And both those teams are so good. Obviously, Mark Andrews, we talked about, had a rough go of it, dropping that 2-point conversion. And, you can't put that on Lamar. And I heard a lot of people say, well, you can't put this game on Lamar. Lamar still did turn the ball over, though. And,
he had a big-time fumble.
And then,
and a stupid interception, too.
Terrible interception.
Horrible.
Right. So I know, I'm very critical of Lamar Jackson, his inability to win in the playoffs. I thought, though, it still was a little bit of his fault. I'm sorry. I can't just,
Oh, of course. It was actually, I would say a lot of it was his fault. 2 huge turnovers. I know Andrews played a huge part, but come on, Lamar, you're the quarterback. You had 2 huge turnovers, and you only lost by 2 points. They're looking at you about that. That's at least what I would be doing if I was a Baltimore fan.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the questions do remain, can Lamar win in the playoffs? Those questions that were around Josh Allen, getting this big win at home against the Ravens, that'll definitely help answer some of those.
And if you're a Bills fan, of course you're facing the Chiefs again.
Yep.
Every year.
It does seem that these two end up every year. So that was a divisional weekend. Very entertaining games overall.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite personal weekend of NFL football, because you still get 4 games and then the higher level games in the wild card weekend. So very much enjoyed watching all those games. Let's get to Championship Sunday, though. Let's preview it. How about it? Washington going into Philly. Kevin, who do you like and what do you think?
I love the Eagles in this game. I just think, Washington, as great of a year as they've had and as great of a year as Jaden Daniels has had, I trust Philly so much. Such a good defense, such a consistent offense, and a coach that's been there before. So I'm going Philly in this one.
Okay. I'm going to go with the upset here. Give me Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. The Eagles have not impressed me much this playoffs. They played okay. Jalen Hurts didn't really play that well against Green Bay in the 2-7 matchup. Last week, they did a lot by running the ball again. But, Washington's going to have to be ready to stop the run. We know that's what they want to do. Saquon had a great game against the Rams, obviously, with that huge touchdown towards the end of that game. But I don't know. I might be the naive one here, and maybe I'm just getting too much attached to the underdog story here. But for different sake on the podcast, you took Philly. Yeah, the heck with it. I'm going to take the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, like we said, the great Jaden Daniels. I hope the story continues.
You're riding that Washington high right now.
I am.
You absolutely are.
I'm riding the Commander wave, I guess.
They've been fun to watch, man. They've absolutely been fun to watch. They've got a very good backfield with Eckler and Robinson back there, a couple decent receivers. Terry McLaurin finally being able to perform in the playoffs, given that opportunity.
Finally as a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Terry McLaurin's reaping the benefits of it. Washington's got a great football team. Obviously, they're one of the final 4 teams remaining. So, I'm not sneezing at them, watching them go into Philly. But Philly's a great veteran team. That Saquon Barkley addition has just added so much to that an already elite offense. And like I said, that defense is fantastic. And I've still got Philly winning the whole thing.
Okay.
Winning the Super Bowl.
And they have a heck of an offensive line too, Philly.
Yeah,
they have
every position group you look at, there's players. Every single position.
Right. Washington, they didn't do a great job of stopping the run against Detroit, which is what does worry me with picking them a little bit, because I thought Ben Johnson self-sabotaged in that divisional game a little bit. I
thought so too.
Jahmyr Gibbs was doing a heck of a job running the football, and they just kind of randomly went away from it. It was weird, but I don't know. Washington, Dan Quinn and the boys, they'll be ready to stop the run.
All
right. Give me the Commanders.
I don't trust them too much, but
all right. How about the big one, the AFC title game Sunday night, Bills and Chiefs? I think, and obviously we'll explain why, but I think we both think this is the year Buffalo finally gets the Kansas City monkey off their back and beats them in Arrowhead. I think we both think that. Is that still holding true with you, Mr. Shagru?
Yeah. I said it last week. I've said it the last couple weeks. Whenever that Baltimore-Buffalo matchup came to fruition, whoever was winning that game I thought was getting to the Super Bowl. I still hold that. I think Buffalo comes out on top in this one. I think the Chiefs' luck just runs out. Kansas City, phenomenal team. Obviously 15 wins. Beat Houston in the divisional round. And not that all 15 wins, I've said this before, not that all of them have come by luck, but you've had some dumb fumbles by the Raiders. You've had some penalties go your way in crunch time. I think they're more of a 12 to 13 win team, talent-wise. So for that reason, I'm going Buffalo. I just think Kansas City's luck runs out.
Okay. I'm right there with you. I think this is finally Buffalo's year. Josh is playing, I think, the best football of his entire career. I think he's personally playing a little bit better than Mahomes right now. I think it's going to come down to quarterback play. And I hate to sound like this, I just worry about the officiating. Is Buffalo going to have a big turnover that the refs are going to take away or something? And maybe I'm being too much a skeptic with that stuff, but I hope that Buffalo's able to do it. I think Buffalo's going to do it. And we're all about the Bills knocking off the Chiefs on the CSR podcast.
Let's go, Buffalo.
Let's go, Buffalo. All right. So, obviously, we'll react to both those games next week, but we're both looking forward to Championship Sunday. Let's touch on baseball a little bit. Yesterday's Hall of Fame class was announced. Ichiro Suzuki is going in. CC Sabathia and Billy Wagner on his final time on the ballot going in. Let's talk about Ichiro first. I saw a lot of baseball writers complaining about how he wasn't unanimous. And honestly, I kind of have to agree with them.
I do too. I think
a lot of baseball times baseball writers gripe about stuff that I'm just like, okay, get over yourself kind of thing.
Right.
But not here. I thought Ichiro should have been in and unanimous. And the person who decided to not vote for him to go in, you shouldn't have a Hall of Fame vote in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So-
Ichiro is one of the most generational players literally ever.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. Let's talk about CeCe Sabathia going in. Now, a lot of gripes locally about him not going in as a Cleveland Indian.
I've got a gripe.
And going in as a Yankee. Honestly, I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion locally. Guys, he probably was better with the Yankees. Like, I'm sorry. And I get it. He started his career here. But he probably was better with the Yankees. And I think he ended up spending more years with the Yankees.
Yeah, he spent it looks like 11 or 12 years by my count.
So I
the
really
Yankees.
I really don't have a problem with him going in with the Yankees.
And 7.5 with the Tribe.
I really don't have a problem with it.
I don't know. I'm just sick of all these players who, whenever they put on the NY on the baseball cap or the LA on the baseball cap, that's what they just want to be universally known as. And it's like, dude, you got your start here, and we drafted you, we developed you, obviously in typical Indians fashion, traded you as well.
Right.
But I don't know. It would have been cool to see him go in as an Indian and not a Guardian, because he was never a Guardian.
Right.
So, and he was at the Super Bowl last year wearing a Chief Wahoo hat.
Yeah, I know.
It wasn't a Yankees hat.
Yeah, but then he went to the ALCS wearing Yankee stuff this year when we played them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
true.
To me, I got no problem with him going.
Whatever,
as a Yankee.
CC. Whatever.
See, I figured
See
you
ya,
were,
CC.
I figured you were gonna have a gripe with it. I don't got much of a complaint about that. Billy Wagner going in on his final time on the ballot. I saw some people complaining about him going in. Guys, he was one of the best closers that I grew up with. Like, he was a hell of a closer. All right, I really have no problem with Billy Wagner going in. I mean, the guy's ERA, I think, career was 2.31. Like,
Sounds worthy of being in the Hall of Fame.
yeah. You have any complaints about Billy Wagner going in?
None.
Okay. All right. So I did want to touch on that a little bit. And the Guardians today signed Paul Sewald. Well, we finally got our wish on this podcast. They spent some money just on the team area. They probably needed it the least.
No, we had the best bullpen in the league last year.
We need starting pitching, and we need
positional players
and we
too.
and we need starting pitching, and we need offense, and we go out and spend $7 million on a reliever. I guess I appreciate.
We're gonna win a lot of 3-2 games hopefully this year.
I appreciate them going to get Class A really good setup man, and Paul Sewald, if he comes back to form, he is a heck of an eighth inning option, Kevin. But it's just like, if you're gonna spend so little, I thought it was just like kind of weird. But I'm still glad to see that they did spend some money also at the same token.
Yeah, I was hoping to see if there was another big move, or big move in quotes, for this organization. I was hoping to see a corner outfielder, like a nice right-handed stick that we can plug in at the 6th spot, not in the cards.
Well, I saw, this will be interesting. They said they were going to raise the payroll. They have, their payroll last year was $98 million. As of right now, it's only $96 million, even with Sewald signing today. So technically, from what they tell us, but they often
there's another big fish out there that they're going to go after.
They often lie to us about that, but yeah, Paul Sewald, like I said, it's nothing against him. Like, I think he's going to get back to form and be a great setup man. Like, he just had too many injuries last year. If he's healthy, he's a heck of an eighth inning option in front of Class A.
Yeah, the only problem is, the only reason it doesn't get me excited is because, how much better is this bullpen going to be than it was last year, if it even gets better? It could say stagnant. Realistically, it's probably going to get a little bit worse. You were the best bullpen in the MLB this past year.
And we know how relievers are. They're very fickle year to year.
Yeah, very fickle.
It's just the way it goes. So, yeah, nonetheless, Paul Sewald was signed. I thought we had to touch on that real quick, and we did. Let's move on to the NBA. Cavs, let's start with them. Get smoked by Oklahoma City, Kevin. 134 to 114. But then they take care of Minnesota nicely on the road. Donovan Mitchell, great bounce back game. And then MLK Day, they take care of the Suns at home. Good good bounce back. It did suck. They got smoked by the Thunder on national TV.
It did.
And it also sucked that Donovan played terribly.
Yeah, it was rough. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see a ton of it. I was actually on a work trip in Michigan, so I wasn't able to watch a lot of the game. I just kept getting updates, and a couple of our associates had come over to me and had informed me of the 30-point deficit that we were facing at the time. So, yeah, it was rough to hear about. I'm honestly glad I didn't get to watch it.
I watched almost the entire game.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get to watch it. I saw, even though we lost by only 20, I heard it was a lot worse than that.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, that's 100% effect. We were down by 40 at one point. I mean, it was.
I did read that.
It was really, really bad. So move forward the Cavs. What are they doing right now? I know they're playing.
Yeah, they're in Houston right now.
I know that.
And the time that I'm checking it, there are 7 minutes left in the first half, and we're up 42-41.
Okay, so a little battle tonight.
Yeah, a little battle going on with the Rockets. And
yeah,
which I was saying on the drive into the studio today. Like it seems like he has been out the majority of the year. I'm gonna have to look at how many games he's played compared to how many games like the Cavs themselves have played. It seems like he has been out over half the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, I mean, the best availability.
The best ability is availability. That's what we always say about Denzel Ward in particular. That's typically the guy we're talking about.
Yeah, so that's tough. I want to touch on this real quick. Cam Johnson's named to the Cavs. Joe Vard did the report, and it's been a very, very popular topic. What would you be willing to give up for Cam Johnson? Oh, God.
For Cam Johnson, see, this is where it gets interesting. I think if it were me, I don't know how the picks are going to work out. I think Jalen Tyson would have to be involved, and which doesn't excite me too much because I do love his.
He's been playing great.
Well, and he's 6'7", 215, 220 pound, great defending wing. He goes up for rebounds, hits down his 3-point shots at a pretty average clip. So the player excites me. He's a guy that came in when we drafted him and said that. He looked up to Josh Hart with the way that Josh Hart plays basketball, and he wanted to be like a glue guy for a team. He didn't need to be a superstar. And if this guy 5 years from now ends up being a Josh Hart type player, then I'm going to be upset that we traded this kid because I think he was an older player when we drafted him, 22, I think. So not the typical 19-year-old that needs some development. I think he's a player in the next year or two that we might even be looking at starting at the 3 spot. So I think he would be involved in a deal for Cam Johnson, though, just with Cam Johnson. That organization, the Brooklyn Nets, needing, the draft capital. They've been in rebuild mode. Outside of the 2-3 years that Kevin Durant was there, they've been in rebuild what seems like ever since they
moved to Brooklyn.
Ever since they moved to Brooklyn and ever since Jason Tatum's come into the league, basically, because those were the Nets draft picks.
Right.
But yeah, we'd probably have to look at Jalen Tyson. Definitely, probably another first, maybe a couple seconds. And then we're going to have to somehow match salaries, which sounds like it would maybe be a Okoro or Max Strus, depending on how the salaries line up.
To me, Cam Johnson fits this team perfectly. And I know I love the way Tyson's been playing. Don't get me wrong on that by any means. Jalen Tyson's been playing great basketball. But. You got to balance the now for the future. I think Cam Johnson makes more of an impact now. I'd be willing to move Tyson and Okoro if it meant getting Cam Johnson, throwing some, because you don't have any first to give, so throw in some.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you. Throw in some seconds or whatever it takes. But to me, Kevin, I'm all about getting Cam Johnson. Now, I wouldn't go crazy overpaying, but if it took Tyson, Okoro, and some seconds, got to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, how a deal for him is going to look. I don't know if there are any other teams that are looking at getting him, but just his size, 6'8", hits down the 3 at a great clip, great slasher. He's one of those players too. I've always compared. I shouldn't say always compared, but Isaac Okoro, I've always said great slasher, needs to consistently hit the 3. How is Cam Johnson defensively? Is he a plus on the defensive end? I've only known him for his offense. That's the reason I ask.
I think he's a decent defender. I don't think he's I don't think his defense is gonna cause
he's
you
not
problems.
Kawhi Leonard. He's not prime Kawhi Leonard defense.
Yeah,
obviously.
but I also don't think his defense is going to cause you problems by any means, too.
Okay, because you know what? Like, even if you are an average to below average defender, if you're a wing player and you're 6'8", your length typically makes up for if somebody blows by you.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
they're going to hold out to get the most they can. I mean, look, they know they're in a position of power. These were their two big keys in the Durant return.
Right.
That's Brooklyn I'm speaking of. So
Mikal Bridges was the
Yeah, and look what the Knicks gave up to get Mikal Bridges. They gave up an arm, a leg, and
Mikal Bridges is also like a different stature of player than Cam Johnson is, though.
Yeah, but Cam's been playing really good this year, and that's why I'm worried. Brooklyn's in the position of power. They have what we need, and what would fit this team and push this team over the top, in my opinion, perfectly. And so the Cavs are kind of in the powerless position.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like I said, Jalen Tyson, Isaac Okoro, some seconds scattered are enough to do it. Now, I saw a report the other day, Brooklyn wants 2 firsts from him. I don't think they're going to be able to get that much. That seems a little much for me.
Well, unless they look at Jalen Tyson as basically a former first-round pick that they would have drafted anyway, and they count him as a first. That's what switching leagues for all of 10 seconds, but that's what John Dorsey did by throwing in Jabril Peppers.
Right.
The Giants wanted 2 firsts, and it ended up being a first in Jabril.
You referencing the Odell trade?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I apologize for not making that clear, but
Oh,
yeah.
no, you're
I was
fine.
referencing the OBJ trade. But some teams look at that. They look at a current rookie that was a first-round pick. They value that as a first-round pick in and of itself if they can't match up the 2 firsts that they originally wanted. So who knows?
Yeah, I completely agree. But like I said, that to me, he fits this Cavalier team perfectly. Gives you another shooting option on the outside. Decent defense, like just average defense, let's say, because it's not elite and it's not horrendous.
The thing that I don't love about Cam Johnson is he's never been like a rebounder at 6'8". Like, I think the most he's ever averaged for his career are like 4 rebounds, and he's a 6'8" small forward. But at the end of the day, like, if Mobley and Allen are going to be in there, like, how many rebounds is he realistically going to be grabbing? That's the reason I love when, we talk about, the best ability is availability. That's what I love about Dean Wade. Dean Wade's got the shot, he's got the defense, and he can rebound.
Right.
Like, Dean Wade really is, like, the only thing is he can't really slash, which is what.
Another problem with Dean is the best availability. Yeah,
best ability is availability.
God, I wish I could say that right.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. No, listen, man. It'll be interesting to see because, like, I think he's probably the number one piece to get moved to the deadline.
Yeah.
I mean, the NBA deadline's crazy. There's always some surprises, and that is the 6th of February. You put here for me, made a note of it for us.
Yeah, February 6th is the deadline.
So
we've got a little bit over a week. Well, actually, we've got about 2 weeks.
Right. Because today's
Yeah.
we're
Maybe got
recording
about 2
we're
weeks.
recording this on Wednesday the 22nd. Last thing, NBA, Jimmy Butler saga, dude.
Oh my God! What is going on? I'll say it. I'll say it about Jimmy Butler. He forced his way out of Chicago. He forced his way out of Minnesota. He forced his way out of Philly, and now he's forcing his way out of Miami. Like, this reminds me so much of the Odell Beckham saga in Cleveland, where it's just like you're forcing your way out of team. You are the problem. Like,
yeah.
If you're forcing yourself out of these many environments, you are most likely the problem. It's probably not 4 teams. It's probably you. Let's look in the mirror here, Jimmy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this guy, he a lot of people view him as this like team first guy, but whenever he is for a while, he presents himself that way. Then you give him a couple years or wherever he is, not even a couple years sometimes. Minnesota only lasted a year. Philly only lasted, a year? Like, this guy, if you don't proceed to please him within a couple of years, he's going to find his way out the door.
It's what Kevin Durant did to Brooklyn.
Now,
It's
listen,
like precisely what he did to Brooklyn.
we know that this is a Pat Riley thing, though. Pat Riley don't care. He'll tell whoever what,
Right.
Look, he sent LeBron, basically he got mad at LeBron for not staying. Like, he'll get mad at the best players in the league. But how do you think this thing all plays out? Does Jimmy end up getting moved again? I don't think so, because Pat Riley's a stubborn,
I think he'll end up getting moved. I just want to know what's going to happen. I keep getting these random updates from Shams. They're like, another suspension for Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler didn't make the plane. He didn't make the plane ride to the city that they were facing, I saw. So they suspended him another couple games. Like, what is the deal with this guy? And I don't even blame the Heat players for this. I saw a bunch of Heat players were PO'd that as soon as he was off his suspension, they just put him back in the starting lineup. I'd be PO'd too.
Yeah.
So this is a guy that's basically been like, I don't want to play with any of you guys. I hate being here, but I'm going to give up on you and then be thrown into the starting lineup. Like, I'd be pissed off if I was a Heat player.
Absolutely. So we here are in agreement. Jimmy Butler's the problem.
Jimmy Butler's the problem.
Not the 4 different organizations in the NBA.
And it's so funny how 10 years ago, I remember him playing for the Bulls against the Cavs in the Eastern Conference semifinals
in 2015.
And I thought that he was, at that time, more of an impact player than Derrick Rose was. Even though that Derrick Rose had hit that huge buzzer beater against us, I was like, this is an up-and-coming, like, very talented kid. Him and D Rose potentially make a great duo for the future. 2-3 years later, forces himself out and thinks he's been a great player in the NBA. Don't get me wrong. Over the last 10 years, I'm not trying to take that from him, but there's clearly something that's missing up there to where he just thinks he's all that in a bag of chips, as my mom used to say.
Yeah. My mom actually used that saying too, but no, that's a perfect way to put it about Jimmy. He does, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets moved by the February 6th deadline. I think that's just about does it this evening.
Yeah, I think that'll do it for us. So please keep the engagement up. Comment on this episode on Spotify, on YouTube. Tweet at us at CLE Sports Realm. Message us any questions or arguments you have. If you agree with us, disagree with us, please comment and let us know. We'll try to be as engaging as we can, and then be sure to at least like this podcast. Hit us with a follow and just turn on those notifications. It helps you not miss any episodes and also helps us be able to grow. So appreciate any and all support that you give us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also starting a little bit here to clip some things. So if you see our tweets, off of our Twitter, you can follow us, like Kevin said, at CLE Sports Realm. We'll be tweeting some clips throughout the week that we think the folks may like and enjoy out there.
Yeah, that if you didn't want to listen to the whole podcast, wanted to catch a clip or two, we'll try to post those on our Twitter, like Jerome said, at CLE Sports Realm. And also, we are recording this on January 22nd. Tomorrow, January 23rd, my nephew Travis is turning 5 years old, so just wanted to shoot a happy birthday to Travis. Hope you have a good fun birthday, buddy.
Happy birthday, Travis. Have a great day tomorrow. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, for Derek, for Kevin, for myself, Jerome, that's it. We'll talk to you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy Championship Sunday.
Go Cavs.